Integers are what we call whole numbers and their opposites. Now we couldn't write all of them down because there would be too many. So we use this little idea of a set bracket. 3 dots say we're going to extend to the left all the way to -1. We're going to include 0. We're going to go to 1. And then these 3 dots say we're going to extend all the way to our right. To look at integers, I believe the best way to think about it is a pile and a whole. If you look at a pile is above ground. And so we're going to call that +1 because it's above ground. So if I have a +2, to represent that, I would draw 2 piles. Holes, therefore, are going to be below ground. So if I dug out a hole, that would be -1. If I dug out 2 holes to represent that, that would be below ground. So we're going to call this line right here the 0 state, meaning there are no holes, there are no piles. We're also going to do the drawing of these a little bit differently because to draw those blocks, it kind of gets sloppy. So we're going to call down below lines, try to make them the same size, -5, and above lines would be +4 to represent those holes and piles. Now what happens in the 0 state is that a hole is going to fill in a pile. For example, here's my 0 state. If I have a pile and I have a hole, guess what happens to my pile? It's going to fill in my hole and I'm back to my 0 state. So 1 pile and 1 hole bring me back to the 0 state. We call those inverse or opposites of each other. Let's draw this diagram. And I have 2 piles because it's positive. I have 2 holes because they are negative. Now if they fill each other in, that brings me to the 0 state. Now if we look at this problem, a lot of math teachers have trouble with those 2 signs written next to each other, with the positive and the negative written next to each other. That is really okay. Sometimes we like to separate it out, and that helps us visually see that I have 2 holes. The negative means 2 holes. So let's try from the 0 state. I have 3 piles. So I'm going to go back to my shortcut diagram. I have 2 holes. How do I know that they're holes? Because of this negative sign. So I have 2 holes. Notice a pile and a hole cancel, a pile and a hole cancel. So I end up with 1 pile. Now I could put the plus sign to represent a pile or leave it as a 1. We recognize that as being a +1. Let's try the next problem. For my 0 state, I have 5. Because they're positive, they are piles. Now I have 7 holes because they are negative. I'm going to line them up because I know that they're going to cancel each other. They're going to fill each other in, and I have 7. So these 5 cancel, and I'm left with 2. Now I look what they are. They are 2 holes. They are below ground. 2 holes. To represent the hole, it must be a negative. Let's try one more from 0 state. Looks like I start out with a -4. So this represents 4 holes. +6. Plus, I'm going to add to this picture 6. That 6 is positive, so it's going to be a pile. There they line up, 4, 5, 6. Holes and piles cancel. They zero each other out. They fill each other in back to ground level. And I'm left with these 2 above ground. 2 above ground are 2 piles, which I could have just written as a +2. If you go back to the very top here, be very careful about the word hole versus hole. Hole in the ground, H-O-L-E-S. A whole number, W-H-O-L-E. Be careful about the distinguishing between the difference between those holes.